Hi, Nigel. Thanks for joining me today on the Financial Planner Life podcast. How are you?
Hi, Sam. Absolutely great. The weather's great this morning. The sun is shining. It's a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. Weather's a bit poor. I'm freaking out a little bit because I'm going up to do the Three Peaks Challenge this weekend. So we're wild camping as well. So we're not trying to do it in 24 hours. We're doing it across a few days. But I think I'm going to have to take the rough with the smooth, I think it's going to be a bit wet one.
Wow. So a nice personal challenge for you there. Great stuff.
100%. Well, let's see where it takes me. So, Nigel, thank you so much for joining me today. And for me, it's a really interesting subject matter. It's lead generation. And throughout my 13 years of working with financial planners and recruiting within the space and talking to business owners, we don't see a great deal of lead generation, especially through things like social media, paid advertising happening with financial planning firms. It's starting to, and people are starting to sort of dip their toe in the ocean a little bit, but it's a bit kind of confusing for people. And I can understand why. I've been on the journey myself and I've invested in digital marketing, paid advertising, and it can sometimes be a bit confusing. You don't quite know what to do. And there's a huge amount of lead generation companies out there that consider themselves to be experts at targeting financial planning firms and saying, I'll guarantee you leads. So I thought today, bringing you on with your experience with Lead Tech, being the CEO there, setting this up and working predominantly within the financial planning space and having huge success and working well with financial planning firms, I thought you'd be a great person to bring on. Tell us a little bit about what you do, demystify the sort of black magic associated, if you like, with lead generation, and kind of get an insight into some of the legislative changes that are happening as well and how that might well affect financial planning firms and hopefully start to weed out some of those scammers that are out there as well. So today, first off, actually, if you could just possibly introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about Lead Tech and who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. As you say, I hope I can add value for your listeners and give them a little bit more of an insight into what is the magic box of lead generation and what goes on there, and hopefully talk about some hints and tips as well for the advisors and planners as to how to get the most out of lead generation, I would say. So my name is Nigel Borwell. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Lead Tech. We're based up in the north of England, just northwest of the Leeds city centre. We've got some lovely offices along the River Wharf. We're very lucky. We started our business, Sam, back in 2008 with a very, very small team. No investment at all. We've kind of grown the business organically since then. We started off in the pension space, generating leads for one or two large companies. We are now about 44 staff with the intention to grow to around 60 by the end of this financial year. We generate around about 10,000 leads a month on average. And we can go into a little bit more detail about that. Around about 1 million consumers annually visit our websites, people looking for financial advice and some kind of help. And we deal with hundreds of financial advisors up and down the country. We're certainly one of the biggest lead generation firms in the financial services space, and in particular the financial advice market. So it's a real kind of core area of ours, which I'm sure we'll go into. As I say, the kind of head offices are over here in Leeds. We've got about 10,000 square feet, some great offices. And hopefully we'll go into a little bit more about what's important to Lead Tech moving forwards and building the business. But there's a real focus on people and technology, and kind of having great offices and a great space to work and collaborate is part of that. Obviously, been a lot of challenges over the last 18 months, and we're only just getting back into the office, which is fantastic. So that real connection that we've all struggled with around the pandemic, we're really starting to kind of get that back, which is brilliant.
Nigel, that's really interesting, actually. So you're a lead generation company. Predominantly what you do is online. And as a tech company, there's this kind of assumption that you guys can all just sit at home, work from the beach. It doesn't really matter. You get these, well, you know what it's like. You get these adverts pop up. I'm a digital marketer and I'm sat on the beach in Bali, earning £10,000 a month. Now, as a business owner, and I'm a business owner also, I've got staff and I've got offices. How excited were you about getting back into the offices? And do you think the offices is essential for collaborative thinking and pushing a business forward?
Yeah, hugely excited. I mean, over the last 18 months as business owners, we've all kind of had challenges, haven't we, Sam? It's been really tough. And I think one of the biggest challenges is the fatigue around Zoom calls, relentless Zoom calls every day. And whilst the business has run perfectly well and we've done okay, really pleased, I guess, in hindsight, given the circumstances. Yeah, there's no substitute for getting in a room and for collaborating and just feeling that connection. And I like to think at Lead Tech, in terms of that culture, we try to foster a feeling for everybody in the team that's that kind of family feel. It's very difficult to kind of achieve that when you're all working remotely. So to get back in the office and just to see the buzz now, it's taken a few weeks because, we all have to adapt to change, don't we? And I think the reverse is true. Coming back into the office, it's been a little bit of a transition, obviously, and some people feel a little bit unsure about things, but I've really seen over the last 3 weeks a change, and we've got that buzz back. It's great. And I mentioned the size of the space we've got. There are kind of 60 people planned at the end of the day. So there's a lot of space for collaboration. We've invested mostly in all that space. So that's how important it is to the business.
Fabulous. Yeah. And I think as well, it's given us as business owners an opportunity to really look at how we work best and how our staff work best. I mean, I'm speaking for myself here really, but we're embracing the flexible working, it's having the office space here, collaborative working, allowing someone to come in and work within the office, but also sort of saying, look, you are responsible for your own desk and your own business essentially within mine. Why don't you work from home when you want to work from home? What we didn't want is this kind of idea going back to this old school thinking that you've got to be here between 8 and 6 to be considered to be working. Whereas I think actually now it's the proof's in the pudding. We've had some of our best months where people have been in and out of the office working flexible, the hours that they want to have. And we've really changed our whole well-being proposition. And also things like the benefits. I mean, we're bringing in things like unlimited holidays and all that kind of stuff, because it's just, why does it have to be so rigid and so controlling? And actually a happy workforce can work from home and work in the office. But I'm a firm believer myself that it's not one way or the other. I think the office is hugely important. You look at the likes of Goldman Sachs, etc., and some of the city banks are saying, look, we want people in here, and rightfully so, because they're learning from people. You do your best learning as a trainee when you're listening to somebody who's done the job for quite some time.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Sam. And we kind of started out by asking the questions. We did a survey and just said, look, what is it you want? And what came back was there's a balance, isn't there? There's the benefits of being in the office and everything we just kind of talked about. But there's also benefit from working from home and getting your head down and just really getting stuck in and being productive. So what we're trying to do, and I don't know if this is going to be the best way, I think we're all learning out. We're going to try and find what works and what doesn't and get that balance. But yeah, try and get more meetings when we're in the office and try and get more work done when we're not in the office. And I think that would work well. But yeah, everybody's really excited about doing both, I think.
Fabulous. All right, well, let's get straight into it then, because like you said, Lead Tech, one of the largest firms out there that specialize in lead generation for financial services firms. And within that niche yourself, a bit like me, you specifically work with financial planners. And a big part of what you do is providing good quality qualified leads for financial planning firms to help them grow. Now, as we sort of alluded to at the very beginning with the introduction, lead generation can be a bit of a confusing and quite stress-inducing worry for some firms. They feel like they've got to do it because that's what everyone's doing at the moment, but they can often feel quite anxious about how to start it. What's the right amount of money to spend? How do you generate leads? What's the competition like? Am I going to get the big one, a return on investment? That's one of the huge things. So it'll be really lovely if you could just kind of talk to us a little bit about lead generation at the very beginning here, what it is in this world right now, what really, say, financial planning firms have to consider, just kind of demystify some of the myths a little bit for us. So over to you, really. Just give us a kind of an overview of what's going on in that world for financial planners.
Absolutely, no problem, Sam. As you said, it's quite a daunting thing, and we do get a lot of planners and advisors come to us that have heard from a colleague or a friend that they buy leads and it works really well, and they get all these positive stories. So they come with this almost illusion of grandeur, with expectation that they'll buy leads and they'll just get rich almost. So our kind of role is really important in that process, I think, and in terms of trying to explain how it all works. But not all companies are the same. And what I wanted to do is go back, as you say, Sam, to the grassroots and try explain what I think lead generation is. And there's a typical kind of model out there, and over the years we've certainly worked that way, and there's a lot of companies that have replicated what we do, and I'd like to think we do and have and will keep leading the way in terms of trying to drive this industry. And when I say that, I mean lead generation, but also specifically kind of in financial services. So lead generation as a term, it's its own industry, as I said. I mean, I was speaking earlier this year at the Lead Generation World Conference about a particular subject around developing and building partnerships, which was really interesting. So it's its own sort of industry, but it's a very broad umbrella term, and it can mean lots of things, from years gone by, from buying data, people that have filled in surveys, and thank God this type of activity has diminished now since the introduction of GDPR, but there's still some of this activity about. So lead generation can cover all these kind of things, and generally I think it means it's any activity that engages the consumer with the view of generating a lead or a sales opportunity. I would say that's the definition. And as you can appreciate, a lot of activity can fall into that if that's what you're trying to achieve. What I find is typically the main lead generation model, and I wanted to kind of maybe go into maybe how that would work from an advisor perspective, and then maybe touching it from a consumer perspective, if that was okay.
Yep, fine. Yeah.
And that might lead us nicely into maybe how our business, what we've learned and how that's evolved a little bit. But typically, a lead generation business would just, I often find, and it's not always the case, but they're quite short-sighted. And it's about that initial short-term win and just trying to find somebody who's willing to buy a lead, and ultimately in this space, in this industry, there's no shortage of financial advisors and planners that want to buy leads. What I've found over the years is actually, when I've really thought about it, it's not the leads that the advisors want, it's new clients. But still, the kind of way these businesses run, are quite typical. And, I would say they'll run some websites, they'll try to attract as many consumers as they can. It's not always the best experience for the consumer. And here's the thing, it's about that kind of transaction. It's about kind of getting the consumer from A to Z as quickly as possible and to provide their information. And what I found is those leads are not always great quality, and there's a balance between managing expectations of what to expect with leads, because all leads aren't perfect at the end of the day. But in terms of the kind of end user coming to the lead generator, the journey is not always a great one, and the expectations are not always managed correctly either. So what ends up happening is it's not a great experience for either. And quite often, more than not, it can be a short-term kind of, a very, very short-term kind of experience for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just think there's a lot of kind of traits that I've seen over the years of companies that work a certain way and almost view leads as data and actually not people, which is, I think, a big part of that.
Okay. So what we're looking at there is then really just sort of understanding what you're saying is like, this is the relationship with the advisor and the lead company. So how they work together, a lead might come across and it's not being looked at as a human being, it's being looked at a piece of data or a number on a sheet. And it's not being looked at in that way. So that's that kind of advisor working with a lead company. You're the lead company providing that. Now, if we looked at it in a different way and we looked at it from the sense of like, okay, so digital marketing, lead generation, financial planning firms perhaps don't want to work with a lead generation company. what are the things that, let's look at the things that, let's put ourselves in the mind of the advisor. What can they do themselves, okay, to generate leads? And perhaps what kind of problems or challenges might they come up against by doing so?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in theory, there's no reason why a firm or an individual advisor, for that matter, couldn't actually set up a campaign that was almost similar to a lead generation company. And I've seen many companies do that. The challenge, of course, is one of compliance. And I think it's important to kind of recognise that there's some real risk there trying to kind of comply with the FCA and the regulator. The type of messages that they can use and the approach itself. It's, there's a real risk there if they don't know what they're doing, that they could stray into kind of an area which could get them into trouble. I just think there's a real challenge in terms of knowledge and skill set as well. Mm-hmm. I know you can spend a lot of money with Google. Certainly they're kind of paid sort of model that they run. I've seen companies spend thousands of pounds in a day just because they don't know what they're doing. So there's some real risk there, and I think the reason why a lot of companies come to us is because they've tried it. They've tried to do it themselves. It doesn't work. And as I've said, Sam, they kind of ultimately want to grow their client base for one reason or another. And in pursuit of doing that, they're trying to kind of, because it makes sense, doesn't it? I'm going to cut the middleman out and I'm going to just go direct and try and attract people to my website. When it doesn't work, I think they tend to come to us and hopefully think we're the answer.
Okay, so it's a really valid point, actually, because if let's say, for example, let's take it back. If you're a financial planner, perhaps you've got a smaller firm, you know that you would like to grow, you'd like to generate some leads. Perhaps you wanted to generate leads because you want to employ some more financial planners. Yeah, you want to grow your business and grow your assets under management. That's what we're looking to do. Yeah, good quality. But the thing is, and one thing you touched on there, I think is so important for a financial planner to understand. Is you are a financial planner. Yeah. Or you are a business owner and a financial planner, and you're the admin manager and you're the office manager, and now you're back to put on a marketing hat. So now all of a sudden you're a digital marketer.
Yeah.
Plus you're trying to run your social media. Plus it's there's so many hats that need to be worn for a business owner or a financial planner. And what we're trying to say here is that, it's about utilizing your time to the best of your ability, which is sitting down in front of good quality clients and doing what you do best, which is building relationships and bringing those clients on board and getting the assets under management and providing a good service to those consumers. When you start adding digital marketing to that, and I am totally aware of it as well, because running a recruitment business, I started dipping into digital marketing, and in the last 2 years, I've got a podcast here, I've become the marketer for our business. Yeah. And one thing is for sure, that it is a skill set and it is a discipline. And by trying to do it yourself, all you're kind of doing is trying to save money.
Yeah.
And by trying to save money, something has to give. And it's usually generating business through, or, some part of your business is going to slip. And I remember kind of adding it all up really, because I thought, well, hire a digital marketer for 40 grand a year, right? That digital marketer doesn't mean that they're going to do absolutely everything for you. It just means they're going to manage the process of marketing. So then all of a sudden you think, well, we'll have this, we'll do social media this, and we'll do Google AdWords over here, and we'll write some adverts over here, and we'll do some SEO work over here, and we'll have the new website being built. And all of a sudden, you're putting all that pressure on this guy who's coming through at 40 grand a year, or girl, and then not taking into consideration the cost and the resource and the time and the energy that actually goes into all of this, and the testing. There's huge amounts of testing that needs to be done on job, on adverts alone. So all of a sudden, that cost becomes not 40 plus, your tax, everything else which goes on top of it. It's that person then using all the other resources. And all of a sudden, the total cost of a marketer within your business might cost you around 80 grand a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something that needs to be taken into consideration with financial planning firms. So when they start looking at these lead companies outside of it, that's where it becomes this kind of okay, well, that's actually could be quite cost effective. to do so that they let their guard down a little bit, and they trust, don't they, then the person who's the expert in it, as long as they've got the evidence to provide to show that they can deliver a return on investment. So I think time, resources, as you've mentioned, budget and skills are a huge part of why people either fail at trying to generate leads online, or are put off, if you like, because they're trying to do it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. There's just so much that goes into it. I think to do it properly, you've got to really invest in this. And a lot of the, we'll deal with individual advisors all the way up to kind of multinational firms, but certainly, individual advisors, especially ones that are new out of an academy, they're kind of on the first rung of the ladder, they've not yet established any kind of relationships for referrals and networking, but they want to really grow their client base, and they're chomping at the bit, and love working with those because do you know what, they've got a great attitude, they're really open, they're not tainted by what's been going on. But essentially, the challenges for anybody, whatever stage you're at in their career, whether an individual or a firm, is they're time poor. There's a huge amount of investment, as you said quite rightly there, Sam, required. They don't really realise the full extent. So what they get with a company like LeadTech is, it's a full team. So when they kind of buy our services, not just buying leads, they're buying our expertise and our knowledge, and the whole depth around the team working for them. So I think when you look at it like that, it might just change your perspective. And do you know what? I think the big point is financial planners are better actually advising clients and talking to them and doing what they do best. And that's my kind of view based on years of experience. And we've just learned, for probably all those reasons, that financial advisors and planners aren't actually very good at working leads because they're time poor. And that's where we can come in. And we've evolved our services and adapted our services to suit really. And I wanted to kind of maybe touch on some of those things because I think it's important that, rather than just keep doing what we're always doing, which I think a lot of companies out there are still continuing to do, and that's just providing leads regardless of knowing that financial advisors are not great at working them. I think that's quite a short-term kind of view. And this is why you tend to see a lot of transient sort of activity. They'll dip in and out of buying leads or try different companies. And we've tried to kind of look at that and just change it in the way that, again, it comes down to experience at the end of the day and trying to build a longer term kind of relationship. And one of the big things that we've done, which I think's worked really well, is we've kind of bolted on additional services like lead engagement services and effectively appointment setting. So, if we provide leads, we'll also work the leads for you. And that's really worked well because, as I said, they can do what they do best. And it's just making sure they've got the transparency and the trust that we're actually going to work their leads properly, obviously. But that kind of service is just an example of something where, as a business, we've learned and we've adapted and we've changed our propositions to provide a better service.
It's kind of be a bit careful what you wish for, isn't it? Because I've been in this situation because you think to yourself, well, I need leads.
Yeah.
That's just a word that gets used in any kind of sales role or whatever. I need leads, I need business. And it's almost kind of like sometimes you can turn a tap on, generate a load of leads, and you're overwhelmed. And it doesn't take like 25 or 30 or 40 leads. You can be overwhelmed with 5.
Yeah.
If you don't have the time and the resources in place to really qualify those leads, which is a skill set within its own right. And it's time consuming because you've got to kiss a few frogs, haven't you, sometimes, to get a princess or a prince. And I think that's a great thing that you've recognized there. There is no point in creating a lead generation company where all you're doing is throwing leads at somebody for them just to go, Jesus Christ, I can't deal with this. And what happens is those leads don't get worked. So they might get an email. They might, they might not even be going into their database to be kind of continually marketed to. There might not even be a phone call being picked up because quite simply that advisor just doesn't have the time to actually do it. So I think adding a service as a lead generation company that sits in between the lead and then the advisor to qualify is a very powerful thing for a lead gen company that specializes in financial planning to do. So tell us a little bit more about that. How did that come about, and why did it come about? Did you have sort of trial and error happen a lot?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we found at times we had issues with attrition, so retaining advisors, and ultimately we want to build long-term relationships, certainly with the smaller advisors. And I think it's just over time we kind of learned from sharing data, sharing experiences, and that's something I wanted to kind of touch on later in terms of how we've changed and evolved as a business and where data fits into that, and understanding what works and what doesn't. But yeah, we kind of recognized that certain types of customers, certainly the individual advisors and small firms, were really struggling, retaining some of the bigger firms, and they were growing and were achieving what we're looking to do there. And it was essentially a long-term kind of relationship. But some of the smaller advisors were, they were coming on, they were lasting a few months, and then they were coming off. Ultimately, what happens if it doesn't work, they just blame the leads. And when you really kind of delve into this, it's not always the leads, it's the way that they're being worked, and it's the approach and the processes. It is quite scientific, Sam, and we've, as I say, I spoke about this earlier in the year on the Lead Generation World Conference, and this was about a framework that we developed over the years that kind of sets out really clearly what they need to do, and I guess a process that they need to follow to be successful. And that's at any level, whether it's an individual advisor all the way up to a large multinational firm. But essentially the gap is they don't have the resource to be able to contact the leads. And sometimes you need a call cadence, you need a process, you need to repeat it, you need people in place to do it for you. So we started out by suggesting everybody did that, but of course individual advisors don't have that resource. So that's where it came about, really. We just thought, well, we've got an internal team. That internal team has always been there because we kind of speak to consumers and try to understand their experience and things like that. So we already had the foundations of the team to be able to speak to the consumer. So we just decided to expand on that and try it, and it just worked really well. And what we found was advisors that were working their own leads were creating appointments at around about just over 20%. Our team internally were, very quickly were achieving just over double. So just, between 40 and 45%. And I think that what that told us really early on was, the efficiencies of the process of being able to handle all these and the conversations as well that we were having. Obviously, we were quite experienced at doing this. So when you're handing out leads to hundreds of financial advisors and planners, they're all very different, and they've all got different skill levels. So it's quite complex. But what you find within that is probably the biggest percentage of advisors and planners can't actually handle all these consistently. So they might have a good month, but they're busy, as you suggested, they're busy doing what they do. And then they might have a poor month the next month. So yeah, so it's been a real kind of positive step forwards for us.
Let's talk about realistic expectations, because again, I think expectations are the types of things that can trip us up, can't they? We have this expectation in our head that it's going to be, it's going to be this or it's going to be that, and I'm going to be earning this much. And so, you've just sort of touched on the types of financial planning firms that you work with. It sounds to me that you work with anybody who's an individual, perhaps even a startup, smaller, medium-sized enterprise that's looking to grow, which there are going to be an abundance of those over the coming years. I genuinely think we're in a startup phase of financial planning. Although it's been around for some time, I think it's startup phase.
Yeah.
And then you've got the larger firms. Obviously, the larger firms have got the resources in place and they've perhaps gone through lead generation before and they know how to manage it. Whereas the smaller firms don't. So let's think about it from an expectation perspective. Let's say I'm a financial planner, I'm a small firm, I'm looking to grow and I want to bring on some more leads. Okay. If I'm working with you, Lead Tech, to help me, what should I expect in month 1, month 2, month 3? And am I tied into some kind of contract, or how does it work?
Generally speaking, with any lead provider, you shouldn't be really tied into a long-term contract. But what I would say, and this is all about managing expectations, and I think a lot of companies don't do this bit very well, Sam, and this is something we've just learned to do really well because it's so important. It's that early stage where, I think I mentioned earlier, they've heard from a friend or a colleague that, within their network, for example, that lead generation is amazing and it's the way forward. So they come to us, they come to us with certain expectations which aren't realistic. So our first job is to manage those expectations. Certainly to understand their circumstances. It's almost like a process with a financial planner speaking to a consumer. We'll do a fact find, we'll understand, their circumstances, what their expectations are, and we'll just manage them. What I would say in terms of month 1, 2, and 3, and this is where it requires a little bit of investment. Whilst you can get a return on your investment in month 1, it is unlikely because ultimately, it takes time. It takes time to, to nurture potential clients through to some kind of business, an ongoing relationship. So even if you're looking at that initial fees for advice, then that might only be a fraction of, that lifetime income. So there's an element of starting to see those initial fees pay for the leads, and that could potentially take anywhere from 2, 3, even up to 6 months. But then what you've got is that effect and impact of that lifetime value, and we try to educate advisors within this process. I think that's really important, and again, it's just conversations we've been used to having, and those have kind of changed and developed over.
What would also be good for the listener to understand is, do you use their brand, so their company page, etc., or do you as a business have micro websites, landing pages, specific campaigns that are unbranded? Because that would be a question that I would be asking. If I had my own business, it'd be like, well, are you using my brand? Are you attracting, using my face? How do you generate that lead, and how do you work with the advisor in that way?
Yeah, typically companies work in different ways in this respect, but typically we build our own brands, which are perceived by the consumer as being independent. One of the things you alluded to, actually, Sam, I think one of the challenges that advisors have just generally is consumer trust. It's always been there to some degree, and the pandemic hasn't helped with that. We know, for example, there's been an increase in pension scams and certainly over this period. And I was just looking at that last night. It's frightening. It's frightening just how there's about 2.2 million in pension funds in this year alone off the back of the pandemic, and it's double from last year. So I guess that kind of strays into some of the conversations which hopefully we'll have around maybe some of the regulation side and what we're trying to do as a business to kind of support that. But yeah, it's kind of really challenging. Sorry, I've kind of lost my train of thought on that question.
So just when it comes to actual lead generation, without giving away the game, are you using the financial planner's branding, or are you, how are you going about doing it? Because, when you start looking at marketing, it's all about landing pages, it's all about Google AdWords, perhaps Facebook adverts, all that kind of stuff. Now, are you plastering their brand out there and building brand awareness for them? Are you working with them that way? Or do you have tried and tested websites, landing pages? You've spent a lot of money and invested a lot of money in SEO, that kind of thing, that drives leads in that way, and therefore you distribute it to the right advisor that's within a specific location. How does it work?
Okay. So yeah, it's more the latter. We've invested heavily in our own websites and tried to build brands. Over the years, we've probably had up to a dozen different sites, and at the moment, I would say we've probably used around about 3 or 4 brands that seem to resonate the best. We've tested them over the years with the consumer. So we spend, I don't know, around about 350, 400,000 pounds a month, driving consumers to these sites. There's a whole range of sort of themes within there, from pensions, retirement, investment, all the kind of things that you would expect financial planners and advisors to really want to advise potential clients on. And we use all those themes to attract consumers at different stages in their journey. We know there are triggers that send consumers online looking for various services. And what we find, Sam, is people are just confused. They're confused as to how it all works, whether they need advice in the first place. So our sites are aimed at trying to talk about financial advice and the benefits of financial advice, demystify, I guess, a little bit about the whole subject, and speak to them in a very plain English way, which I think is really important, and just explain the benefits and also the cost of not getting advice. I think there's a real kind of value to getting advice and cost to potentially not getting advice in certain circumstances.
Great stuff. Okay, so did you mention there 300 to 450,000 a month you spend?
Yeah, I did. So we spend a lot of money on advertising. Obviously, we're attracting 1 million consumers to our sites every year. We do try to, we are developing our organic strategies, and this is obviously the SEO side of things. And I think moving forward, this is where we're trying to develop more content around some of the subjects that we've talked about. And I mentioned right at the beginning about this business and how we've developed over the years, what we've learned in terms of what advisors want, but very much a transition now and breakaway from what I would class as a typical lead generation model, the ones that we've described before, where we kind of feel they're a bit short term, don't really think about the consumer. They might even see that as just a lead or data. And we're taking very much a different view now, Sam, that actually what we want to do is be recognised in the industry because we're passionate about financial advice and the value that brings. Be recognised in the industry for a company that's not just a lead generation company, because I kind of think it's bigger than that. We're actually a consumer-led business. And that really is kind of where we're taking the business, really thinking about the experience the consumer's having, starting to engage more with the consumer, whether that's just online, but mainly over the phone. We're doing a lot more of that. And that allows us to start to think about and speak to them about what it is they're looking for and their needs. And again, then it becomes about trying to match them with the right type of service providers within this industry. And I feel when we start to get to that, that's when we'll be able to add true value.
I think the history of lead generation sites sometimes can, especially with the unscrupulous ones and the ones that don't really know what they're talking about, can be associated with scammers. There's a huge amount of people that pay a lot of money to put their to put their adverts at the top of Google, but yet they've got absolutely no understanding of financial services. As you rightfully said there, no care really for the end consumer. They're not educating them or, thinking about their well-being at that initial stage. And all they're doing is generating these leads. They're sending them off to financial planners and they're charging them for the lead. And there's no qualification on it. There's no thought or consideration to the consumer. There's almost also companies that are just putting out high returns, we'll invest this money for you and we'll do that. And lo and behold, the poor consumer is being misled on a platform such as Google, of which they feel that they can trust it. So there are a huge amount of changes that are happening in the profession, but also online. So with Google, the FCA coming together to create a legislation that does protect the consumer, but also as well ensures that financial planning firms or financial services firms are abiding by the rules and they can be fined and, imprisoned, I suspect, at some point if there's going to be some sort of major issue going on. But so you probably know a little bit about that then. So that new Google Ads financial products and services policy, can you just tell us a little bit about that and what's going on and how that might affect financial planning firms and also consumers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is coming into force it's coming into force at the end of September. Or beg your pardon, it's coming into force at the end of August, but will actually be operating from, I think it's the 6th of September. This has come about, and I think all the signs have been there for a while now that this downward pressure from the regulator on Google and other advertising platforms because of the scams, because of the unscrupulous companies that are out there that are putting kind of messages out there to consumers, attracting them in, and ultimately, it's not a great experience and potentially even a scam, as we talked about earlier. It's just not great, and we are absolutely over the moon about these changes. In the business, we were talking about this around about 18 months ago, and we decided to apply for direct authorization with the FCA. My issue, Sam, has always been, it's a regulated world that we're operating in, but lead generation isn't regulated, and it's just so jarring. And what we wanted to do, we wanted to future-proof the business because I kind of felt that this was always going to happen. I think the pandemic has brought us a little bit more forward, in terms of action, but I knew it was going to happen. So by being regulated, I felt we were certainly future-proofing and de-risking that scenario as far as lead tech's concerned. But I also wanted to add value. I think from a consumer's point of view, it's really credible for them to have that reassurance and comfort that whoever they're dealing with is authorised and regulated. And as we know, a lot of lead generation companies aren't at the moment. So the main change here is from the 6th of September, as a lead generation company or marketing agency, if you're not directly authorised or authorised as a third party or by a third party, so indirectly authorised, then you will not be able to continue to promote financial services in any way. So that's a big, big change in the industry. So as it happens, it's not going to affect lead tech, but certainly will be affecting many, many lead generators in the industry.
Now, I know that there's a certain amount of money that's being put in. I think it's around 5 million quid or something that's being sort of put into this to try to help the process to ensure that they do weed out the these fake companies, the ones that aren't following the rules and regulations. But as you alluded to a minute ago, you're spending nearly 400,000 a month on advertising yourself. So 5 million to me sounds like a really big figure, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not. And also as well, Google's huge, right? Google's massive. And there are so many different ways that you can manipulate SEO and manipulate your ranking to be able to promote and any service that you want, right? Crikey, you can get away with selling drugs online. It's not a different, Now, also then take into consideration some of these major platforms, social media platforms, TikTok, huge, YouTube, obviously owned by Google, but you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram. I mean, it's a great start, isn't it? But what a huge task. Do you think this will make a massive difference? Do you think it will make a difference? And obviously you're doing the right thing by getting yourself FCA authorized, because obviously if you're a financial planning firm and if you're bringing a lead in from a source that isn't covered, then perhaps there could be liability down the line that you're not doing your due diligence correctly and that you're not sort of working with the right lead methods of attracting clients in. But back to my point, really, how long do you think it's going to take to really, really make a difference on these kind of fake adverts and fake financial coaches and all the people promising the riches and the best leads? Do you think it's going to make an impact or not?
I mean, I would like to think it will make an impact going forwards, but as you quite rightly said, it's huge. It's a start. I think it's a great start, and I think this is a catalyst for change. There are lots and lots of lead generation businesses out there, and I can't speak for the FCA, but it's my feeling that regulating all these businesses is a huge undertaking across all these different channels. How that will evolve and change, I don't know. Whether it's going to get consolidated and just the larger companies will get less, it'll be easier to kind of regulate. I don't know, but I do think it's a start, Sam. I think other companies will follow. I think other advertising platforms will follow quite quickly. I would think, and I would encourage other lead generation companies that want to do it right to follow as well. Follow our footsteps, because this is doing the right thing. This is for the greater good in this industry and in other industries as well. So I think the days are gone where it's about trying to make a quick buck. It's trying to generate as many leads and sell them as much as you can and make as much profit as you can. So, we're a long-term business. We're a credible business. Our reputation is important. And I think if those things are important to you and developing long-term partnerships are important to you, then it's not about the short term, is it? It's about doing it in the right way. And, not to kind of repeat myself here, but I firmly believe it starts with the consumer. And giving them a great experience. And I think that's ultimately what the FCA are trying to do. And, by working with Google and trying to kind of just remove some of these unscrupulous businesses,
I think one thing, and a message to be very clear right at this point, is that this isn't something that's being planned. This is something that is taking effect, and it's taking effect from the 6th of September 2021.
Yeah.
So if you are a financial planning firm, if you're thinking about working with a lead company, or you are being approached by lead generation companies that are promising you the earth, one of the key things right now you should be questioning them is, are you authorized to be able to advertise financial products, and can you show me that?
Yeah.
And that's a real
absolutely. There's a real risk now, isn't there? I mean, I think there always has been. I think you alluded to it earlier, that it's been a responsibility for the advisor, or firm, to do their background checks and to make sure that what the company that providing them leads are correct. And quite often, advisors come to us and they don't ask us the questions. So we kind of naturally go through those steps and talk to them about the right things. But I would imagine if companies don't do that, then maybe that gets overlooked. So yeah, absolutely. It's really, really important now that if you're going to buy leads in any form, make sure that they're authorised, with the FCA. Because if you don't, then obviously there's a real risk there for your firm.
Absolutely. And then also as well, if you're doing that, if you're working with the right lead companies, you're contributing to the protection and the good brand image of financial planning, which everybody wants to ensure remains squeaky clean. Gone are the old days of just flogging products. We want this kind of profession to be looked upon as being a vital service to the end consumer, a well-being product. And if you're towing the line and you're not just trying to get a cheap quick buck or a cheap way to generate leads, etc., and you're working with the wrong people, then all you're doing is contributing to the problem. So therefore, make sure that you ask the FCA, ask around the FCA authorization. Nigel, I read in the IFA in IFA magazine. I know Alex Sullivan, actually, who runs IFA magazine.
Okay.
We set up Gunner & Co together, which is an IFA acquisition business some time back. But anyway, enough about that. I saw your advert in there, your advertorial, and it was saying that you guys were one of the first then to get the FCA authorization. Is that still the case? Are you sort of leading the pack here?
We believe we are the first, if one of the first, or even the first, because we started out this journey, Sam, back in autumn last year. So we know that it takes around 4 to 6 months. So there'll be a lot of companies that didn't expect this to happen and will be reacting to this. And as I said earlier, it was a real kind of strong part of our strategy over 12, potentially 18 months ago to get authorised anyway. And it was more than just protecting the business. Obviously, that was the key thing. But it was about trying to get on the same page as our customers. Why should they have to kind of do those checks and due diligence? Let's give them some comfort that we're an authorised firm and we understand and for the consumer as well, as I said before. So it was always a firm part of our strategy. So I would suggest that we're quite ahead of the curve by a number of months. But at the same time, as I said, I do encourage companies to kind of follow suit, and I think they will do now, obviously, to continue to to do what they do. Just going back, Sam, if I may, to I guess asking the questions. The FCA is a big one, isn't it, now, and very relevant, and I'll put that top of the list. But I think there are a number of things that advisors and planners need to think about when they're shopping around and when they're thinking about lead generation. There'll be a lot of companies out there and firms that haven't bought leads before. Equally, there'll be a lot of your audience that have bought leads and had some experience, and maybe it's not worked. I'd be more than happy to kind of share some of our insights if that would be of use.
Fire away.
Okay. I think you've not bought leads before. I think it's important to ask the right questions. I can obviously provide a lot more around that, but essentially, understand more about their journeys, their websites. What does that consumer kind of journey look like? Not just the sites themselves, but take it all the way back to the adverts, the messages. What are their advertising campaigns? Which channels do they use? And try to understand that full experience that the consumer would go on. And that tells you quite a bit about whether that would be a good fit for your business. Is it more around retirement? Is it more around IHT? Is it just general financial advice? I think that's a really good way of trying to kind of understand what to expect when you buy leads. Try to understand a little bit about their process. So what approach do they take to supporting you as a financial planner, given that you don't know anything about buying leads, you've never worked leads before? How will they help you? And what does that process look like? I know we can demonstrate that as a part of the framework we've created, as I said, but and that's a great question I don't think you can be overly thorough around some of this stuff, because ultimately you could be talking anywhere from, depends on what you're buying, but anything from £50 up to hundreds of pounds for an introduction of some kind. Now, you could quite easily be spending thousands of pounds in a month. And if that's not working for you, or your expectations not being met because you've not maybe thought enough about this right at the outset and really sort of checked who you're working with, then you are throwing good money after bad.
Cool. Okay, that's some really good tips there. What about okay, I think also as well, when it comes to lead generation and working with lead generation companies and marketing companies, for example, there's a kind of, money always comes up and how much it costs. And it's an area that people are always kind of slightly anxious talking about, money. We all like, oh, how much is it going to cost, mate?
Yeah.
Can you kind of give us a kind of understanding? So I'm a financial planner. I want to generate leads. Okay. What is the typical costs? You alluded there to 50 to £100. Is it pay per lead? Is it pay for conversion?
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about how much it costs and how you come to those calculations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a starting point to that is there are lots of different models out there. A common one in the market is a pay per lead model, which, as it suggests, for every lead that you buy, that is in criteria, you will pay an amount. So that depends on what type of lead it is, whether it's a general lead or whether someone just looking for financial advice, or whether it's a specific kind of lead. If that lead has been qualified and to what level it's been qualified. So, and again, I sort of mentioned this before, but thankfully it's been weeded out. But, just buying data, there were companies selling that for a few pounds. Whilst technically that's lead generation, it isn't the kind of lead generation activity that I've been involved in. And it's not I wouldn't recommend advisors and planners kind of get involved in that kind of thing. But, you know, so there is a kind of flaw to this, but I would say generally you're probably looking at upwards of £100 for a typical lead, where a consumer has come onto a website, they have expressed some interest in financial advice around a particular area, and then their information will be sent on to you. So upwards of £100. What might happen then is the company might qualify that a little bit further, so they might speak to them. Or they might ask more information online. Again, that might just change the price or alter the price. But essentially, they'll speak to them over the phone, find out a little bit more, do a mini fact find. And again, you could be looking at hundreds of pounds there. If the consumer then, dependent on the net wealth, that could be another factor. So if we were to speak to somebody and they had £1 million as opposed to £50,000, then that might alter the value of the lead as well. And there are some companies, Sam, that might operate slightly different models where, you know, it might be a paper conversion of some kind, or there might be an arrangement where they pay something up front, but then they pay some kind of ongoing fee based on the value of that client once it's established, which is interesting. So there's lots of different ways it can work, and again, your listeners might want to think about what would suit them and ask the right questions when having those conversations. I mean, ultimately, to generate a lead, it costs money. You know, I mentioned we spend, you know, anywhere between £250,000 and £400,000 some peak months of the year. That's across all our advertising platforms, but we do spend a lot of money with Google. They're always the winner in this, aren't they? So, but yeah, I mean, there's a cost to buying those leads for us, and we're always managing those costs and trying to make those work for us. We work off quite tight margins. I think lead generation companies tend to do that. You know, a lead might cost us, you know, £50, for example. We might sell it for £100, which sounds like a huge profit. But when you start to consider the amount of leads that are in a criteria, so the consumer might only have £1,000, and that really isn't right to pass on to an IFA, for example, and they wouldn't pay £100 for that, quite rightly so. So we couldn't sell that. So there's a lot of leads that fall out of scope that we can't sell. So when you kind of factor it and work it all through, you know, the margins are very, very tight at the end of the day. I'm just giving you some example numbers there. But essentially, it's based on what we sell them for is based on what they typically cost us.
Now, Nigel, you mentioned there about the pre-qualified and unqualified. So let's say, for example, I was a financial planner and I didn't want to subscribe to the service of qualifying that client lead. Now, that client lead came through because they were interested in potentially a pension transfer. That pension transfer came through to me. Am I going to receive any kind of information about that client? You know, do you take anything from a pre-qualified perspective where you haven't spoken to them, but perhaps they've filled out a form? Do they put in the total amount of their pension they've currently got, their age, their location? What am I going to expect at the other end? Is it completely cold, or is there something that I can get my teeth stuck into?
No, it is one. I mean, ultimately, the consumer has sought out our service in some way. So they come online, they proactively, you know, searched under a keyword. You know, it might be, you know, financial advice in Leeds, for example, or Bristol, or it might be pension advice or something more specific. But ultimately, they'll come into our site and they'll come through. You know, this is where we engage them, try to give them some messages, talk to them a little bit about financial advice and the benefits. But in the end, what they will do is choose to place an inquiry or not. And if they place an inquiry, what they'll do is they'll provide some information. So yeah, all their contact details, including their address, postcode, what they're interested in, and just any other additional information that they feel is appropriate at that point. And that information then is kind of packaged up. Now, how we work in the background is we work with hundreds of financial advisors, as I said, different types of advisors, operating different models. And our distribution system basically will work out where that consumer should go. Now, this is where the tech comes in. And this is where, as a business, certainly looking at the future, really, really wanting to start to make that more sophisticated and use technology to help us better match. So the matching at the moment is about, if they're looking for a financial advisor and they're based in Leeds or Bristol, then we'll certainly match them to a local financial advisor or a financial advisory firm that kind of meets their criteria. What I'd like to do moving forwards is start to kind of get a little bit more granular with that through our consumer brands by understanding a little bit more. We do get the opportunity, Sam, to speak to a large percentage. I think it's about 25% of all consumers that come through our sites we will speak to in the first instance, and that is increasing all the time. It's one of our goals to increase that to around about 80% by the end of next year. So this is where the kind of engagement and understanding comes in, and we'll be better placed then to put them in touch with more relevant services.
Historically, I can't remember the name of I think it's like Vouched For you've got, haven't you? And there's some other ones out there.
Yeah.
And I remember, and perhaps I'm getting this wrong, so don't hold me to this, but there was like a bidding system where like advisors almost bid for the leads.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me sounds a bit shit. But also as well, it kind of creates this sense of urgency, doesn't it, amongst planners? So, and also a scarcity, I kind of get that. But it feels wrong. And do you do that at all? Or is it, how do you establish who the right financial planner is to get that lead, for example?
Well, we're quite selective on who we work with. And I'm not sort of saying that in any arrogant way. Over the years, we've learned that lead generation doesn't work for everybody. We've talked about that and why. But we've learned to kind of do certain checks. I think, as I said, trust is a big issue. So giving confidence to consumers is a big thing for us. So, we talk on our sites quite a bit about kind of vetting advisors, and obviously we only introduce to regulated firms anyway. So that's the kind of big point. But anything we can do above and beyond that to actually do our due diligence and do our checks to make sure the firms are qualified in the right way and they offer the right kind of advice and so on. So we are selective in that respect. If we don't feel that it will work for an advisor, we'll have that conversation. And this kind of goes back to the different services that we offer as well. So we do get some advisors that are absolutely hell bent on working the leads themselves, and we just don't believe it will work for them because we don't have the time. So we don't mind saying no, but ultimately, we've got a number of advisors sat behind, what we call a network, without it being confusing language, and that, as I say, we've got kind of hundreds of advisory firms, individual advisors, kind of on this network that are looking to take leads in certain areas of the country. So again, if we get a match, then the consumer will be kind of sent there. If we speak to a consumer, then potentially that kind of is a more qualified introduction, and we might charge more for that, as I said earlier. But that really gives us an opportunity to, I love this, just gives us that kind of better insight into the consumer. It's a better experience for them, and it really allows us to kind of think about who we can place them with. And I think this is kind of where we're going, and we're going to be doing more and more of that as the months progress.
Lead tech are positioned really well out there to understand the, dare I say, buying habits or triggers of the consumers that are out there in the UK. Now, there is the great transition of wealth that's happening over the next decade. So a huge amount of money is being transferred down family to family. There's also a growing advice gap. You're positioned well as a technology company and a firm that established themselves as driving leads through on an online basis. Are you seeing a trend, an upward trend, in the amount of consumers that are seeking financial planning or advice of some sort, or buying their or engaging with financial management online?
Well, thank you for saying that, Sam. And yes, we are. You know, I kind of touched on this at times around this consumer-led focus for our business, and obviously people and technology, and that is all about us getting more in tune with the consumer and how things are changing in this industry. It's hugely complex. You know, and again, on the back of the pandemic and the introduction of digital and more streamlined advice models, you know, consumers can get some level of advice in so many different ways than they could 5-10 years ago. So things are really changing, and we're trying to adapt our propositions to suit. And I think we were talking earlier about, you know, certainly over the next kind of 12 to 18 months, we're investing heavily in some new brands. And what we're trying to do there is just trying to make that user experience, taking it to another level and using technology to really understand. So, you know, if you're a female, you're based in a small suburban town with a more well-known city, you're looking for, you know, you've recently been divorced, and you're looking for a specialist advisor, you know, around the subject, just as an example, then I'd really like us to be able to kind of really easily provide a great experience for the end user to be able to come on, just tap away and just say, look, this is what I'm looking for, and to be able to either speak to somebody here or just get matched really quickly in a really neat way to an advisor that can help them and just kind of ticks their boxes. Where I think kind of we're at, even though I think we're ahead of the game, and certainly a lot of lead generation companies out there, it's still that kind of 101 lead generation kind of typical model that I explained earlier, where it's not as consumer focused. So I do think, as far as lead tech concerned, really investing in these brands and starting to kind of be a voice around within the industry, because, you know, as I say, we've gone from lead generation company over the years now to, you know, it's much bigger than lead generation. You know, we're really passionate that financial advice is very valuable for the average person, and everyone should have access to good quality advice. And we see our role and take it really seriously, that, you know, that we can help people in a very kind of, I guess, secure and trusted way. We can help people easily find the perfect advisor for them.
That's interesting, actually. I like the way you understand that, and the collection of data, the collection of consumer habits and consumer questions they're asking in Google, and that you're then, by the sounds of it, creating almost micro niches within financial planning. I think one of the major ones is females, isn't it? You know, the transition of wealth from male to female is going to be huge, and it's going to be like way more female millionaires than ever. But also, I like what comes up a bit, actually, and I've spoken to a few financial planners from the LGBTQ plus community, and that there's a total lack of any kind of financial planning firms, or even like there's a few out there that do it. But I mean, that's a huge area. And I've had some, you know, I've had a gay chap on the podcast, and he said, look, it is vastly different. And, you know, a chap who's gay, a couple who's gay is so different from a male and female, even to like how the systems are set up. You know, it's Mr. and Mrs. all the time on the systems and stuff. When they go through the process of getting financial planning, and their lifestyle is completely different. You know, it's not, they don't typically have kids and stuff like that. They do tend to have more disposable income. And I think understanding the end consumer more, like you're doing, investing that energy and time into it, I think it's such a valuable thing. And again, it's like, if you go back to being a financial planner and thinking, right, I need to delve into understand the consumers, it's huge. It's big data, isn't it? There's a science to it. You've alluded to that. There is data scientists out there that are digging and understanding this information. So yeah, it's great. And I think you're well positioned to be this kind of leader within that data. And I think, it takes that weight, I think. And when an advisor understands the detail that you guys go into, it should really take the weight off of their shoulders a little bit. And then there's trust in you that you're doing what you're doing. And look, if I'm going to put a budget in place, which could be £1,000 a month or £2,000 a month, dependent upon your need and your ability to be able to service those clients, then it's actually quite a great place to chuck your money, instead of just chucking it into a Facebook advert and trying to do it yourself with some guy on Fiverr or Freelancer or something like that, isn't it?
Totally agree, Sam. And you're right, data is huge. And I think this is a difference between, lead tech and some of the companies out there that we kind of sort of touched on before. And there's so much opportunity around data. It's that consumer insight that we touched on there. It's a big focus for us. But sharing data as well. We've been sharing data now for about 3 years. We're massively ahead of the curve with it, in terms of insight. So it's that managing expectations piece again. So when advisors come to us and go, well, how does it all work? We can share that insight. And we go, well, this is how it works. And this is typically what happens. But manage your expectations around that based on their circumstances and, what they're doing and how their business is set up and their processes and their resources, etc. So data is huge for us. It really is.
Just one thing I think people always would like to hear is almost a kind of testimonial, if you like, or have you got an example at all where you have helped a financial planner grow their business or, gain more business? Have you got anything like that you can share with us today?
I can definitely share some insights. We've got to be careful not to kind of name names here, but as I said, I think it's important to kind of say that we kind of do genuinely deal with a whole diverse range of planners and advisors, all the way up from right at the start of the career, just come out fresh out of an academy somewhere, all the way up to kind of retiring advisors. And small, medium, and very large firms. So to kind of give some examples there, I personally love to hear about when we're working with a new advisor. It's just great because, as I sort of said earlier, they're fresh into it. That they need new clients more than ever. They don't have those existing support kind of systems to allow them to get referrals. So they're quite reliant on something like this. They don't have the cash to inject and invest into their own activities, because we said earlier, it can be quite expensive. So they're kind of a little bit reliant. And this is where I love the fact they come to us and not somebody else, because I think, right, okay, we can talk them through how this can work and really understand them. And there's loads of examples where, we've got advisors that we've worked with for years, and we've been working with them from that point in time where, the first run of the ladder. There's one company up in the north of England, there's 3 advisors. They're quite small in terms of the number of advisors. They've got quite a lot of support staff, but they're quite lean. They've got some great processes. They now handle all the leads themselves, but initially we did all that for them. So I guess there was an educational piece along the way. So I think since 2014, just to try and give you some numbers, they've added 80 million in terms of assets under their management, and the majority of that has been down to lead tech. So they tell us, a great success story, and there are lots of them. We deal with some of the country's largest wealth management firms. One company, they've got hundreds of financial planners and investment managers. We've been working with them now for around 15 years. They're a 24 billion kind of asset under management company. So they're a huge company, but we're an integral partner to their business, because, we don't just generate them leads. They don't just see us as a lead generator. So again, sort of going back to that framework that we have created, we're an intrinsic part of their business, and they do their own stuff. They use a number of lead generation companies, but by far we are their biggest partner. And I think that's just a testimony to kind of how we work and the results that we can get.
Fabulous, Nigel. Thanks very much. So let's just talk a little bit about what the next sort of year might look like for you guys then. So lead tech, you're doing very well. I read in an article again that you're looking to grow your business. You're looking to grow the numbers.
Yeah.
So obviously a firm that's stable, a firm that's making money. You are forward thinking in the tech world. Insights is a massive thing for you. So just give us an overview. What does the future look like for you guys at the moment, Nigel?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking to grow the headcount within the next 12 months to 60. So yeah, that's nearly 20% increase there. Raising the standard of lead generation is hugely important to us, Sam, as I've said before. And the FCA kind of strategy was a part of that, and trying to be a little bit more transparent and accountable as a business. But really kind of now developing our brands and developing our consumer propositions is a key focus area over the next 12 months. And that is to do more of the things that we've talked about, provide better experiences. We're recently kind of rolling out a strategy in the business which is more consumer focused. Really important to get people to engage and buy into why do we exist? Why are we doing what we do? So we kind of made some changes there, which are a bit clearer, a bit more kind of focused around the consumer, in the hope that will kind of fuel everybody's excitement around and get everybody on the same page. So lots of great things happening. There's going to be some key appointments to allow us to kind of go to the next level in terms of adopting technology. As I say, we're a tech business in financial services, and we want to keep investing in technology. And there is a substantial investment that's going into everything we do, basically from the team to the kind of new brands that we want to build and create, and that's going to take a lot of investment. So it's very much a year for investment, change, and just building some foundations for future growth.
So all things going forward, it sounds very, very positive. What I love about this the most, if I'm honest with you, Nigel, apart from helping firms grow and hearing stories where you're helping firms get to 80 million under management. What I loved about what you touched on as well was the new advisor, because there's going to be so many new advisors coming into this profession, and they are going to struggle to win clients, especially as training and development might not be there as much. Yeah. So they're coming in with this belief that there's a lack of financial advisors, therefore they're going to make loads of money. But it's really hard to generate clients. It's difficult unless you've got an extreme network. And if you've got a great network, you've still got to learn how to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So these guys coming through and establishing brand new clients, it's going to be hard. So that's a lovely position to be in as a business, and a great way to help the profession grow with these guys coming through. And also any firm that's then considering setting up an academy or wanting to hire new people from different professions can turn around and say, look, we've got a strategy. We've put into our finances of the growth of our business. We've said that we're going to put £10,000 aside for lead generation. So I love that. And that's really on point and just shows you know what you're talking about. Yeah. But also, I just love the big data side of it. I love that you understanding the end consumer and what they're doing, how they're doing it, and you're tweaking your sites and your approach, your SEO, and all that type of thing to be really connected to that end consumer. You're not just some, suit in the back room who's just chucking a few quid and hoping for the best. You actually are invested heavily in understanding that end consumer and getting yourself authorized by the FCA. Again, is that trust, that's alignment to the profession. I mean, that's what we require within the profession, and that's what financial advisors require. So there's a lot of what you're doing that I absolutely love, and the fact you're growing anyway means it's working well. But again, icing on the cake, proof is in the pudding. You're spending up to £400,000 a month on leads across the whole business, on lead generation across the whole business. I mean, that's evidence enough that you're obviously making money and it's working. Therefore, that's going to trickle down to the financial advisor. So there isn't a great deal there that makes me think, because I've spoken to loads of lead generators, loads, and sometimes it can feel like a real blaggy kind of market.
Yeah.
A little bit like recruitment. But you guys don't sound like blaggers, and I think the reports that you're going to create off the back of that data, so it opens you up to just being an expert, doesn't it? Really understanding what the market wants, and especially from a financial planning perspective. And that's all they want to know is what's going on.
Yeah.
Where should I put my money? Where should I put my energy? And that's it's really great. So I really appreciate you coming here today and sharing that, and giving our listeners an insight into really what a lead company does, and a good lead company does. And I'm sure, we talked a little bit about, just prior to the podcast, we can put some kind of download together, or maybe some further information, some links that we can add to the show notes, where we'll take our listeners to find out a little bit more and hopefully connect with yourself, Nigel, or your business.
Great stuff. Yeah, it's been a pleasure being on your show, and thank you for inviting me, Sam.
No worries. Thank you so much for sharing, Nigel. All the best, mate.
Thank you.